The air hung thick with the smell of charcoal and sun-warmed grass. Laughter, my sister's bright and joyous, mixed with the murmur of conversations. She moved through the clusters of friends and family, a freshly minted high school graduate, her cap slightly askew, beaming. Beyond the festive chaos, near the back fence, where the hydrangeas drooped under the late afternoon sun, a woman stood. Her dress was dark, a material that caught the light with a subtle sheen, entirely out of place amidst the casual shorts and sundresses. She held herself with a quiet, almost unsettling stillness. Beside her, two teenagers, a boy and a girl, shifted restlessly. They shared her dark hair and a similar angularity to their jawlines, but their eyes, wide with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity, were fixed on the party like spectators at a strange, unfolding play. No one approached them. No one waved a casual greeting. They were an island in a sea of familiarity. A quiet ripple, like a stone dropped into calm water, began to spread from the nearest group of guests. Furtive glances were cast towards the fence, then quickly averted, only to return a moment later. A whispered question, an incredulous shake of the head. Carol, our next-door neighbor, leaned conspiratorially towards her husband, her hand cupped over her mouth as if to trap a gasp, her eyes wide with dawning realization. My dad, in his worn apron, was a picture of contented domesticity, flipping burgers, the smoke curling around him like a benevolent halo. His usual boisterous laughter punctuated the air, asking about preferences, offering seconds. My mom, meanwhile, navigated the clusters of guests, a bright smile fixed on her face, refilling pitchers of iced tea and lemonade. Her laugh a little too high, a little too frequent. They were separate components of the party, each performing their duties, their paths rarely intersecting. My mom's gaze swept across the lawn, a quick survey of glasses, platters, and mingling guests, her smile unwavering until it snagged, abruptly, on the trio by the fence. Her hand, holding a pitcher still brimming with lemonade, visibly trembled. The ice inside clinked against the glass with a sharp, sudden sound. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look that was first a narrowing of the eyes, then a widening of raw, disbelieving recognition. A slow, shuddering breath escaped her lips. Her head tilted slightly, as if trying to grasp a new and impossible dimension of reality that had just opened up before her. She took a step back, bumping into a fold-out table. My dad, oblivious, called out, "Another round of hot dogs coming right up." Mom set the pitcher down on the table with a clatter, a few drops of lemonade splashing onto the checkered tablecloth. Her movements became stiff, almost wooden, as she began to walk, not towards the fence, but directly towards my dad. Her eyes, however, never quite left the dark-dressed woman. She reached him as he reached for another patty from the cooler. Her hand clamped down on his arm, her fingers digging into the flesh. He turned, a casual, questioning look on his face, a smear of barbecue sauce on his cheek. "David," she said, her voice a low, guttural sound, barely audible over the party's hum, yet it seemed to slice through the air, carrying an unspoken weight. Her eyes darted from his face to the woman by the fence, then back again, pleading, accusing. His gaze followed hers. The spatula, mid-flip, froze in the air, a perfectly browned burger clinging precariously to its edge. The burger began to smoke, then char. His face, ruddy from the heat of the grill and the afternoon sun, drained of all color, leaving it ashen. His jaw went slack, hanging slightly open. The woman by the fence, now fully aware that she was the focus, took a slow, deliberate step forward, her chin lifting in a subtle, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. The two teenagers moved with her, a unified front, their eyes fixed on my dad, an unnerving mirror of his own stunned expression. The pop music, a popular track my sister had chosen, seemed to recede, replaced by a growing, unnerving silence. Conversations died. Laughter ceased. Heads began to turn, slowly, in unison, drawn by the sudden, intense stillness emanating from the grill area. My sister, still surrounded by her friends near the dessert table, finally caught the shift. Her bright smile faltered, replaced by a look of confusion. Her eyes followed the collective gaze, landing on the dark-dressed woman and the two teenagers. Her eyebrows furrowed. The woman by the fence squared her shoulders. Her voice, when it came, was clear, unhurried, cutting through the heavy silence like a sharp blade. "David," she repeated, her tone neither harsh nor soft, entirely devoid of the warmth one might expect at a family gathering. "I thought it was time." My dad's hand opened. The spatula clattered to the concrete patio, the charred burger rolling off and coming to rest near his sneaker. He tried to speak, his mouth working, but no sound emerged. He looked from the woman to my mom, then back to the woman, his eyes wide with a raw, primal terror I had never witnessed before. The girl standing with the woman, her face a pale reflection of her mother's composure, took a tentative step forward. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath. But in the profound silence, it was heard by everyone. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The joyful chaos of the party shattered into a tableau of frozen faces, shocked expressions. My mom let out a choked sound, a mixture of a sob and a gasp, a primal sound of betrayal. She took a stumbling step back from my dad, her hand flying to cover her mouth, as if to stifle a scream. My sister's face, moments before radiant with graduation pride, crumpled, her eyes welling with sudden, disbelieving tears. The barbecue smoke continued to curl lazily upwards from the grill, but the smell of burnt meat was utterly overshadowed by the sudden, acrid scent of a life, a family, being irrevocably undone before our very eyes. The profound silence hung heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the grill and the muffled thumping of music from a neighbor's house. Faces, once etched with party smiles, were now masks of shock, confusion, and dawning understanding. Lucy, still near the dessert table, swayed slightly, her hand reaching out blindly for support, finding only empty air. Her eyes, wide and glistening with unfallen tears, darted from her father to the strange girl, then to the woman. A soft, incoherent whimper escaped her lips. Hillary, her back to David, turned slowly, her entire body rigid. Her gaze, sharp and accusatory, locked onto Molly's. No words were exchanged, but the tension between them was palpable, a live current arcing. Then, Hillary's eyes flickered to the boy standing beside Molly, then back to David. Slow understanding spread across her features, hardening them. Her breath hitched, a ragged, broken sound. Her arm shot out, not to strike, but to push David, a desperate, reflexive gesture of repulsion. He stumbled back a step, still mute, his eyes fixed on Molly and her children as if seeing ghosts. A collective intake of breath rippled through the frozen crowd. Whispers, tentative and hushed at first, began to unfurl like smoke tendrils. Heads ducked together, hands flew to cover mouths, eyes wide with the sordid drama unfolding. Carol, the next-door neighbor, visibly recoiled, her hand gripping her husband's arm like a vice, her face a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. Others began to edge away, some feigning sudden interest in their phones, others making discreet exits towards the backyard gate. The festive atmosphere had curdled, replaced by the suffocating discomfort of a deeply personal catastrophe laid bare. Molly remained utterly still, her posture unyielding. Her gaze, direct and unwavering, held David's, an almost unnerving calm in contrast to the storm around her. The boy beside her, taller than the girl, his face a younger, rougher version of David's own, stepped slightly forward. His eyes scanned the stunned faces of the partygoers, then settled on Lucy, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of recognition passing between them, though Lucy seemed too overwhelmed to register it. He said nothing, but his presence, towering and undeniable, added another layer to the already unbearable tension. Hillary, her face contorted, finally found her voice, a raw, piercing cry that seemed to tear through the fabric of the afternoon. "Get out!" she shrieked, her arm flailing, pointing wildly at Molly and the children. "Get out of my house, get out of my life." Each word was laced with pure venom, aimed not just at the newcomers, but at David, who flinched as if struck. Molly's expression remained perfectly neutral, a study in calm defiance. "We're not going anywhere, Hillary," she replied, her voice steady, clear, almost conversational, a stark contrast to Hillary's raw anguish. "Not until David acknowledges his son, Mike Jr., and his daughter, Charlie." She gestured subtly towards the boy, then the girl, naming each in turn. David, as if a spell had broken, seemed to crumple inward. His shoulders slumped, his head bowed. The charred burger lay forgotten. The air thickened with unspoken histories, with years of deceit and hidden lives. The scent of burnt meat, now stronger, mixed with the sharp, metallic tang of impending ruin. Lucy let out a choked sob, turning her face into a friend's shoulder. Her graduation day irrevocably poisoned. The laughter and music of the party were gone, replaced by the chilling silence of a family fracturing under the weight of an undeniable truth. The once bright backyard had become a stage for a very public, very painful reckoning. David, whose name now felt like a curse echoing through the stunned gathering, remained motionless, his head bowed. The words his son, Mike Jr., and his daughter, Charlie, hung in the humid air, heavy as bricks. It was not an accusation, but a stark, undeniable declaration, delivered with a detached calm that was far more chilling than any scream. David's silence was a confession, louder than any spoken word. Hillary's face was a mask of incandescent fury, her eyes blazing, but for a moment, the raw scream had been replaced by a guttural sound, a strangled gasp of pure disbelief. Her gaze swept from Molly to the children, then back to David, who still hadn't lifted his head. The sight of his bowed form seemed to ignite a fresh, hotter wave of rage within her. She lunged, a desperate, almost animalistic move, her hand reaching not to strike but to tear at David's shirt, as if to rip the skin from his bones to expose the lie beneath. He stumbled backward again, his hands coming up defensively, not against a physical blow, but against the unbearable proximity of her pain and fury. The boy, Mike Jr., stepped forward slightly, his posture defensive yet somehow protective of his mother and sister. His eyes, so like David's, held a mixture of defiance and a deep-seated weariness, as if he had witnessed this kind of exposure before. Charlie, the younger girl, clutched Molly's hand tighter, her small face pale and wide-eyed. Yet she did not cry. Her gaze was fixed on Lucy, who was now openly weeping into her friend's shoulder, her graduation cap still askew on her head, a symbol of a future that had just shattered. The collective gasp from the guests had evolved into a low murmur, a collective shudder through the garden. The polite, superficial smiles had vanished, replaced by open-mouthed horror or tight-lipped judgment. Carol, the next-door neighbor, seemed to shrink into herself, pulling her husband closer, as if to shield him from the contagion of scandal. Her whispers were sharp, audible only to her husband, but the tenor of her voice was clear, utter condemnation. Others, who moments ago were laughing and exchanging pleasantries, now found an urgent need to check their phones, to adjust a hat, to find something, anything, to occupy their hands and avert their eyes from the raw public spectacle. A few, bolder perhaps or simply more self-preserving, began to melt away, sidling towards the side gate or the house, their departures as quiet and furtive as shadows. The celebration of Lucy's future had become the funeral of a family's carefully constructed past. Hillary's hands eventually dropped from David, her rage momentarily exhausting her. She stood panting, her chest heaving, her eyes now narrowed into slits of venomous hatred as she stared at Molly. "You," she spat, her voice a low, dangerous hiss. No longer a shriek. "You did this. You ruined everything." Molly finally shifted, her gaze still centered on David, as if Hillary's words were nothing but background noise. "He ruined it, Hillary." Her voice remained steady, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos erupting around them. 15 years ago he made his choices. I just brought them to light? Her eyes finally flickered to Hillary, a faint, almost pitying look. It was never going to stay hidden forever. David finally lifted his head, his face ashen. His eyes, hollow and haunted, met Molly's, then flickered to Mike Jr. and Charlie. A flicker of something, perhaps shame, perhaps recognition, crossed his features, but he still said nothing. He looked utterly broken, a man whose carefully maintained facade had been ripped away, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. Lucy, pulling away from her friend, looked up, her face streaked with tears. Her eyes, red-rimmed and swollen, focused on Mike Jr., then on Charlie. The boy, uncomfortable under her gaze, subtly shifted his weight. Charlie, meanwhile, seemed to sense Lucy's distress, and for the first time, a flicker of something other than stillness crossed her face, a fleeting shadow of compassion, quickly masked. The air thrummed with the unspoken and the unspeakable. The distant music from the neighbor's house, once a cheerful backdrop, now seemed mockingly inappropriate. The scent of burnt hot dogs mingled with the raw, metallic tang of tears and betrayal. The party was over. The family, as they knew it, was over. 10 minutes later, Molly left. Quietly. No scene. No conversation. Just gone. She simply turned, a subtle nod to her children, and walked towards the side gate. Mike Jr. and Charlie followed, their young faces a study in stillness, mirrors of their mother's composure. No one tried to stop them. No one spoke. The guests who remained stood frozen, watching them go, as if witnessing a spell being broken. Hillary was still, a statue of rage and grief, her eyes fixed on the empty space where Molly had stood. David remained hunched, his shoulders slumped, unmoving. The silence that fell after their departure was profound, heavy, filled with the echoes of shattered trust. The remnants of the party, the half-eaten cake, the scattered presents, the wilting flowers, now looked like archaeological artifacts from a long-dead civilization. That night, the house was a tomb. Lucy had retreated to her room, the sounds of her muffled sobs occasionally piercing the oppressive quiet. David was nowhere to be seen, having vanished into his study the moment Molly had left, the door now firmly shut. Hillary sat in the living room, in her usual armchair, the one with the floral pattern that always seemed to clash with the muted tones of the room. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the window. The television was off. The only sound was the distant hum of the refrigerator. I found her there, wrapped in a silence that felt colder than any winter chill. I remembered the feeling of the scorching sun on my skin just hours ago, the smell of freshly cut grass, the illusion of a perfect family gathering. Now it felt like a lifetime had passed. I sat on the armrest of the armchair opposite hers, my knees drawn up to my chest. The words came out quietly, almost a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile peace. "Mom?" She didn't stir immediately. Her gaze was fixed somewhere beyond me, into the darkness of the room, perhaps into the dark corners of her own memory. Then, slowly, her head turned. Her eyes, even in the dim light, looked ancient, burdened. She looked at me, a long, searching look that seemed to strip away years. "I was wondering if she'd show up eventually," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion, as if discussing the weather. Not a question, not a statement, but a simple, terrifying fact. My breath hitched. "Who?" "Molly?" She nodded. Her gaze returned to the shadows. "Yes. Molly, you knew?" The question was barely a squeak. My mind reeled. Knew what? Knew about the other woman? Knew about the other children? The pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know existed were suddenly falling into place, each one striking me like a blow. She sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "Oh, Jane, I've known for years. A long, long time." My entire body felt cold, despite the warmth of the summer night. "How long?" "Almost 15 years, she replied, her voice still quiet, devoid of the familiar warmth I had always associated with her. "She lives one town over. They have 2 kids together, Mike Jr. and Charlie, as she so helpfully announced today." There was a faint bitterness to her tone when she spoke their names, but it was quickly swallowed by the pervasive weariness. I felt like the air got sucked out of the room. My entire childhood, every family holiday, every car ride, all of it suddenly felt staged, like I'd been living in someone else's script without realizing it. I remembered David's unexplained late nights, the sudden business trips that seemed to pop up, the way he would sometimes seem distant, his mind elsewhere. All the little inconsistencies, dismissed as the eccentricities of a busy father, now clicked into a grotesque, horrifying pattern. "Why?" I asked, the word hoarse, a desperate plea for understanding. "Why didn't you say anything? Why did you stay?" She finally turned to face me fully, her eyes meeting mine, and I saw a deep, unyielding resolve there, tinged with resignation. "For the sake of appearances, Jane." And because, in my words, she paused, a grim line forming on her lips. The damage was already done. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For appearances. My mother, the pillar of our family, had willingly lived a lie, had condoned David's betrayal, all to maintain a facade for the world. The pain of her revelation was a physical ache in my chest, worse than any heartbreak I had known. It wasn't just David who had betrayed me, it was Hillary too, in her silence, in her complicity. I've barely spoken to my dad since. He never apologized, never even brought it up, just acted like nothing changed. The day after the graduation party, he emerged from his study, looking haggard but otherwise composed, as if a quiet weekend had passed. He went to work, came home, sat at the dinner table, and made small talk about the weather or the news. The elephant in the room was so enormous, so grotesque, it became invisible. Lucy and I exchanged glances that carry volumes of unvoiced pain and anger, but he seems to float above it all, untouched. He is a ghost in his own house. It's wild how you can grow up in a house with people and still not really know them. The people you think you know best, the ones who raised you, who shaped your world, can turn out to be strangers, capable of unimaginable deception, living double lives behind masks you never learned to see through. And when the masks finally fall, the world doesn't make sense anymore.